See, actually, a culture of any community is the memory of their past. They carry that memory. And to give up on that memory is very difficult for any culture, right? So if they have to bring a change, it only comes when the community members of that culture, they become mature. That's why movies which she enjoyed in 80s, now she doesn't like, because now she has understood that doesn't make any sense, right? So I completely agree on this point. Now I will give an academic perspective to how we train people to handle biases, right? So I was mentioning this author called Daniel Kahneman. He talks about system 1 and system 2. And similarly, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who has talked about black swan, or he also talks about intuitive thinking. The idea is, they say that from our childhood, why don't we train our kids to question everything, which is discouraged in all the cultures. Like for instance, you wear this, why should I wear this? Give me the reason, rationalize. So when it comes to rationalization, and when it is objective rationalization, from there you start questioning your own biases. You do this because that's what we are doing for so many years. That's not an answer. Help me understand, why should I wear a jacket when I'm sitting for a panel discussion? Help me understand. Because it looks good on camera, right? But if I have to go out on a street and to have a street food, this jacket will not good at all. But if it's our culture to do this, then it will not make any sense. So rationality starts from very childhood, when we start helping students question by asking why. At the same time, when people are answering to why, we have to ask, so what? Why this why not the other why? Because there are different whys, right? I have to choose which why I want to choose. Why do you want to force a particular why on me? And even there we don't have to stop, and we have to keep asking, what else do you have? So it's like an ever evolving, ever evaluative process where we keep challenging and questioning our thought process. That's how we start with. So what happens initially, there's this scholar, his name is William Perry, he talks about how our cognitive development happens. When a child is learning, for instance, when the child reaches the age of, for instance, 17 or 18, at that time, whatever a child reads in a book, the child believes that is the only right thing. Even as a father or a mother, you say something else, they will question you, saying, no, that's what my teacher has said, or that's what is written in a book. That's the first stage of cognitive development. Then what happens, gradually from that stage, that's called a stage of duality. Then they move into relativity. When they go to a university or a B school like XLRI, they realize everybody is saying right things, and they are right in different ways. And professor says, you are also right, you are also right, you are also right. And then they start believing everybody is right. That is also not a good stage to accept and start believing like that. And then there is a final stage of commitment, where I know I am right because I can rationalize. And I can rationalize objectively with objective data. Similarly, other person, if he is actually rationalizing something objectively with the data or evidence which is mutually accepted, I will change my view. Otherwise, I will stick to what I think. So that we have to push ourselves to that commitment stage, so that we start questioning and challenging, right? We can learn to understand why we think in a particular way. At the same time, even if we are critical in our approach, that is also a bias, because sometimes unreasonable skepticism creates more problems for us in our workplaces. We question everything. So that is because sometimes you have to work on assumptions, sometimes you have to work on in the areas where you have no clue. Like for instance, as COVID was happening, nobody knew how to handle that black swan, right? So people were using assumptions. Take the case of our vaccine. Initially people said put mask, then put N95, then you get vaccine booster. Nobody had clue. We had to rely on that data. So there, if you say, no, I am critical, I will go only with evidence, sometimes you will not be able to survive. So we have to learn to question, we have to learn to challenge, we have to learn to doubt. At the same time, there is another writer, his name is Toulmin. He says, simple logic is, whatever you say, if you have reasons and evidence which are accepted by all, you say that this is what you have to accept. If you don't have reasons or evidence to support what you are saying, tell it is my opinion, this is how I think, it's your choice whether you want to accept it or not. This will kill most of our biases, right? But interesting talks.
I want to make one more point. Yes, sorry, I cannot let it go on rationality alone, because I think we overplaying on rationality assumes that we have all the data at our behest and that we are unbiased in looking at that
That's
data.
what I said. So being critical is also a problem.
Yeah, so I think the very key is empathy. In all of this that you're saying, I want to put a foundation of empathy, which is try to put yourself in the shoe of the other person and see how you would feel about the decision, because we are not logical creatures. We are definitely emotional creatures, and it's not going to work if you only use
because neuroscience says that we have a brain called amygdala, which controls our prefrontal cortex more over prefrontal cortex controlling amygdala. So our rational brain is controlled more by our emotional brain over emotional brain getting controlled by emotional brain.
So Rahul, to her point, one of the major biases is the confirmation bias. I already have my pre-concluded notion of bias. I'm only looking at or picking data selectively to validate my story.
That's what's happening in our politics today.
Yeah, exactly.
Everywhere.
It's just
Everywhere.
Sorry, we just can't.
No, it's amazing actually. So before I conclude, all the good things come to an end. So this panel discussion or round table, because there is no table, so I was calling it panel discussion, it will also have to come to an end. So before we conclude, I just want one concluding remark from each one of you, right? Keep it brief and in a nutshell, try to say what's your stand on the topic we have. Can we start with Somana?
Okay, I think I said the last thing I said about empathy. So, questioning yourself without judging yourself and therefore being open minded and using empathy when making decision making would be my takeaway from this conversation.
Yeah. I would say that, all of you, because this is for XLRI students, when you come into the business world, you'll have great careers and you'll go ahead. Remember to be a champion of inclusivity. It is not necessarily for you to be a good human being, which it will make you and stand out to be. But I think it's a fundamental reason to be a good business leader.
Thank you.
So in my mind, I think looking ahead, we have to start the education way up front and do a lot more deeper intervention when we have students in campus to really appreciate, build the empathy component. Now, these are not things that you can inject, but it also has a longer learning curve. It's not like a skill where you can learn a programming skill. It takes a lot longer to unlearn and learn. So I would really like to see this learning happens way early in the process. I'd like all of us as corporate leaders to influence campuses and colleges that we engage with on making this part of the learning process, so that hopefully we're building a more aware and empathetic, bunch of people for tomorrow.
Thank you.
So I think the moot point is that what you don't know, you don't know. So therefore kind of keep on exploring. Right. And the second point, I think you made a wonderful statement that to all the students there is that education is all that is left when all that is taught is forgotten. So to me that is education, and if you are really an educated person, then you really sort of behave or act, talk or walk in a particular manner. Yeah.
So thank you. It is always interesting to talk to the industry leaders because they are the ones who can actually correct us or sometimes create problems when we argue. It's easy to control students. So it was pleasure talking to you all. Right? I also learned a lot in this process, and thank you very much. I enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure you also enjoyed this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.